Hey, welcome to another episode of Two Lawyers Walk into a Bar. Today it's just one lawyer, unfortunately. Lee Bergstein here with a great guest who's going to make up for the fact that we don't have a co-host today. And she's a lawyer herself, of course, Pradnya Desh. Pradnya is the CEO and founder of Advocate AI, a company revolutionizing the legal industry by providing businesses with AI-powered legal team to streamline contract creation, negotiation, and compliance. But she also, before starting Advocate, practiced, served as a U.S. diplomat, also worked for an award-winning law firm based in Seattle. So we'll go through all of that terrain and kind of figure out how you got to Advocate where you are today. But first, thanks for joining us today.
I'm really glad to be here.
So back in the early days of this podcast, when we would get together in a studio before COVID ruined that, we would sit around a table and have cocktails, and we would ask the guests in advance what they wanted to drink. So I still like to ask, if we were doing that, it's also Monday morning, Monday afternoon, not the best time to drink in any event, but if we were doing that, what would be your drink of choice?
Well, it is for me in Seattle 9 a.m. and
9
so I start with my latte every morning.
All right, well that's as good an answer as any. Lattes in Seattle are definitely probably the go-to option. So we appreciate you being here. I guess let's start at the beginning. Growing up, did you want to be a lawyer? What did your parents do? What kind of background did you have as a kid?
Yeah, interesting. So my parents are both doctors, which meant that all through growing up I was subjected to lawyer jokes because they knew they knew that I wanted to be a lawyer when I grew up. And I think in the medical profession they are afraid of lawyers and they only know about one kind, which is that right, malpractice lawyers.
Well, the ones who prosecute the malpractice cases and the ones who defend it. So there's two kinds, right? Um,
That's a good point. They fortunately didn't have to go through the entire process, so they only knew about the ones they were afraid of.
Yeah, whenever I go in for a physical or any kind of doctor's appointment, and the doctor asks what I do for a living, and I say lawyer, there's always like the oh no, let's find a new doc. It's the same joke every time.
That is true. And so, actually, in fact, I gave birth during law school and had to take a torts exam right after giving birth, and so it was first year, and so I was like in my hospital room studying, and my mother walked in and said, "You need to put that away. That's offensive. Like you are studying torts in a hospital right now. Please." I'm like, I have an exam tomorrow, so I got to do what I got to do.
None of the doctors know what torts means anyway. It could just as easily said any other nebulous legal concept that doctors wouldn't have picked up on. If it said medical malpractice in big letters, then you'd be in trouble.
I put a post-it on my like the outside of the outline that I was reading anyway, just to be on
So
the
so
safe
what was
side.
the journey from growing up with two doctors where everybody's talking about lawyers to that hospital room where you're studying for torts? How do you get there?
Yeah, well, I knew I wanted to go to law school, but I actually went through a different path, which was that I did a bachelor's in international relations and really loved that. And then stayed around for a master's in economics. And so then I started out not in a legal career. I started out as an economic analyst for the government. And
Oh wow.
so, and like really, actually, really loved that. Like really loved digging in to the how economics. I mean, how different trade agreements influence how U.S. businesses operate. And so I got to dig into the economic side of that, and that's what led me to law school.
And so what department is that in the executive branch?
Huh, that would be the CIA.
The CIA. Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
I analyzed various flows from my desk at the CIA.
got it. Very cool. And how long were you doing that for?
I did that for about 6 years. And so
Okay.
I kind of stayed longer than I was planning to, just because I love the work. Like I really loved policy work.
Yeah. And you didn't. I guess you didn't have to respond to emails saying the five things that you had done
Oh my goodness.
prior week.
I can't even think about that right now. I cannot imagine what my former colleagues are going through today.
So while you're at the CIA, are you thinking about law school still, or were you considering staying in government? What was the thought process as you're working there?
Yeah, no, I definitely wanted to stay in government, and I loved the process of analyzing trade agreements and their effect on people. But I didn't want to be in the back; I wanted to be in the front. So, in other words, I wanted to be the one negotiating the agreements. I didn't want to be the one writing reports and telling people how to negotiate them. So I thought, okay, now I need to go to law school. So I went to law school, and I knew that who negotiated agreements are the U.S. Trade Representative's Office and the State Department. And so I went to law school with the goal of joining one of those, and took the foreign service exam. Right around end of first year, beginning of second year, it went well, and then I started as soon as I graduated. I started with U.S. State Department.
Okay, and what were your like? Was that like the only place you wanted to be, or were you thinking about other options, or did you know that you wanted to go back and kind of continue the journey that you'd started before law school?
Oh, yeah, I knew for a fact that I wanted to negotiate trade agreements, and so it was kind of the only path I was planning to take. Also, once you're on that path, it's such an arduous path that you don't really take it lightly. Is that you take right? You take an exam that takes months to study for, and then you get selected among essentially a certain number of people of the people who take the exam. They decide how many every year they're going to take, like say the top 200 scores, for example. And then they go through a panel process. And then after that, you go through several more months, and then a 2 year, 6 month to 2 year security clearance. So by the end of that, if you change your mind, you probably should have thought of that 2 years ago.
It's it's an interesting path because you talk to virtually anybody who goes to law school who hasn't worked before law school, and they're kind of fumbling around a little bit. Like they're obviously not fumbling around that much. They're in law school. They're doing their work. They're studying, but they don't really like. I feel like trying to think of a polite way to say this. I feel like the career journey is basically what makes the most financial sense for me. Like, how am I going to make the most money? Or like what, even if I'm not going to a firm or a place that's going to make the most money, like how do I position myself to ultimately make the most money? But it sounds like the fact that you had such great experience before law school, you kind of knew what you wanted to do, and law school was a vehicle to getting to that place, which I think is even for people who we've interviewed who have worked beforehand isn't always the case. So I think you're among the lucky ones in that regard.
Thank you. It sounds so strategic when you say it that way. I don't know that it was. It's just that I get passionate about something, and then I try to figure out a way to make that happen.
So how long were you at the State Department for?
How long was that? So I left in 2008, and
Okay.
so that was. So I did a tour in Geneva, and then I did short. So a tour for us is between 2 and 3 years. Usually, the first one is 2 years, and then after that, it's three. And then I did 1 month tours. So short tours. So my tour was within Washington D.C., and then 1 month in all over the world. Japan, Indonesia, Hong Kong, Egypt. Where else did I miss? Thailand, India. Let's see, and then all over Europe. So it was I guess total about 5 years. So not that long in State Department. I was
Yeah.
planning actually for it not. At the end of that wasn't it initially wasn't planning to be the end. I was planning to take a 2 year break, but I found something that I liked during my 2 year break and didn't end up going back.
Oh, I definitely want to get to that, but I want to hear about your time in Geneva. So what
Yes.
were you, what was your day to day like there? And how different was it from, um, you know, sitting in a back office somewhere and kind of looking at things from, I guess, purely a purely economic perspective. Now you're mixing economics and legal, um, and leveraging all that experience. So, what are the big differences? Were there any similarities?
Well, sitting, being in the back, well, so, yes, there were a lot of similarities. Although I have to say this is that walking into the room as a diplomat of the United States is an experience like no other. I mean, it's just that the power that it that comes with it. So I'd walk into a room in which the we were about to start a plenary session at the World Trade Organization, and when I'd walk in, I'd perceptibly notice that the volume of conversation would drop a little bit, and I mean that's quite an experience. And so I'd walk to my chair, and I would notice people noticing walking to my chair. I'd sit down, and then they'd call the meeting to order. And so that I've never had that experience before or again. That would be amazing if that happened. If I walked into Starbucks to get my coffee, it never doesn't happen anymore.
You
But
had like the Brad Pitt Angelina Jolie experience, but on the government side.
something like that. No, but I mean, it also carried a lot of responsibility just because
Yeah.
I knew that the reason I was there was to negotiate for a result that would help to improve the economy and just the well-being of people of the United States. But also, we were really there in an international setting to help our trading partners as well. And so we were very much there to create a win-win. And I loved being part of something that I knew that we were only there to help everybody win.
How like what did the staffing look like? Where were you working out of? Where were you living out of? Were you with a big team? Was it a small team?
Yeah. So the mission there. So in a country, a the place that you work, if it's not within the capital, it's either an embassy or a mission. So Geneva is a mission. So the mission there had worked with a lot of different international organizations: WTO, UN, um, something atomic. I clearly didn't wasn't part of that, so I don't know. So, but each had their own floor, and so we were a fairly how large was that? Maybe about 250 people. So, it was a nice team that we could call on various people to work with. We had I worked with a group of trade negotiators. There were about 12 of us, and we covered various parts of WTO and UN.
And then when you moved on to the shorter tours, what educate me? What was the difference with respect to those as to what you were doing when you were in Geneva?
Yeah, actually, the time wise, it was the other way around. I said it in this order, but in the shorter tours, we were working on launching a trade round, and so I went to the countries to start the Doha round of trade negotiations and convince them why the United States thought that it would be important and helpful for their own economies and bring us closer together as trading partners. And then I went to Geneva after it started to actually
Yeah.
negotiate the trade agreements, and so it was a continuation of the same work.
How was the you were traveling so much? It sounds like how was the uh, kind of working without a home base and moving from place to place, which is something that it sounds like you weren't doing before that at your career in government and law school. So all of a sudden, you're leaving law school now. I guess with a young child, you're traveling all over the world. How was
Yeah.
that?
Well, I mean, you still get a home base if you stay somewhere for a month, in my opinion. I think it's a really exciting way to see the world and get to
Sure.
know so much, not just about the world, but how other people live, how other people think. It's an experience that I wish everybody could get, is that really being able to see how different and similar people are in the way they approach work and their families and life. And so I just thought it was exciting. It eventually I eventually decided that it was time to stay put for a little while, but was happy to do that as long as I did it.
And how did you approach? I'm always curious, as someone who different type of government, but I left government and went to private practice. Also, how did you approach that transition What was the kind of decision making behind it, and then how did you execute upon that ultimately?
Yeah. So I think I alluded to the fact that at first it was not planned. It was that we had our third baby in Geneva, and I thought, all right, maybe it is time to just stay put for a little while and not move from place to place. Because even every 2 to 3 years, when you have young children, feels like a lot. And so I thought, let's just do a tour back in the U.S. And then so I took 2 years off. Actually, I asked for 2 years away, and then to join the next tour. And then during that time, I am an attorney, so I can only change diapers for a little while before I get really, really bored. So I started a law firm while in the Seattle area, just because and well, there was a little bit of strategy to that. I have to say, some of it was yes, I needed to get back into the swing of things, but it was also that in working in policy, I knew that I saw things in the macro level, like I could see policy and how countries economic policies work and how they relate to one another. But what I had never done at that point in my career is actually worked with individual clients and directly with people and with companies. And so I thought that I would really like spending some time doing that, and I did. And so I started a small boutique international trade law firm in the Seattle area. We I guess we started with two attorneys and then grew it to about 12 during the time I led that firm, and was really glad to just get the opportunity, just the one-on-one individual, see what the policy I had been talking about all that time was all about.
How hard was it for you to, again, and this is a very similar path with different positions to myself. How hard was it to go from working for the government, really great structures in place, protocols in place that have been there, I would imagine, for decades, all of a sudden kind of fashioning your own thing, launching your own thing? How was that experience for you?
So it was definitely it took a huge learning curve, I have to say. I mean,
Yeah,
there are so many things that are built in for you in the government, and I think maybe the first is mission. Is that so I started a law firm trying to figure out like what is our mission. And sure, companies have and law firms have vision statements. It's really not the same thing
yeah.
as right as that. This is why I'm here, and this is every day why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so that was the first thing I had to figure out. And I think I struggled with that maybe the most of why am I doing what I'm doing? Sure, we're trying to get a great result for our clients, and that is very important. It didn't feel like the same thing to me. And so that was hard. And in a law firm, there's business development, which was something I knew nothing about. And yet it's the lifeblood of any firm. You have to figure that out, and you have to figure that out really fast to survive it all and to keep the engines flowing. And so I had to learn a lot about that. And then a law firm, which I didn't realize until after I had started one as a business. And so I had to learn how to run a business, and I didn't know how to do that. And so, yes, I would say it was bumpy. And so there was so much between me and the mission that I had to figure out before even getting to what I was trying to accomplish.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess while you were practicing, is that when you began to kind of identify, I don't want to call them deficiencies, but opportunities to improve the workflow process, to improve the user experience for clients? How did you begin to kind of notice that? And when did the wheel start spinning that maybe I can do something to solve some of these issues?
Yeah. So that I think was part of the searching for mission throughout the time I was a law firm attorney. And I started to notice that my attorneys did a lot of very repetitive work, right? That's part of the profession, is that there's a lot of work that we do over and over again. And it's important to do that work over and over again because each client is different, or each situation is different, but a lot of it is similar. And so there's so much similar, and then there's the tweaks. And so of course we were doing repetitive work, we were billing for that repetitive work, and that is unsatisfying for attorneys, and it's of course unsatisfying for clients. And so I started really thinking about that, is that what can be done about that? Or what can be done with that as a tool. And then I also started reading at the time about the justice gap and the fact that the vast amount of legal needs go unmet. 92% of civil legal needs for low income individuals are entirely unmet. And at the same time, for low income households, 72% have had at least one civil legal matter in the past year. And so the fact that there's nothing for them really bothered me, especially coming from a policy mindset that we're as attorneys, we're here to administer justice, to keep the world fair, to make sure that rules are complied with, and to advocate for our clients. And the fact that there were so many people that didn't get access to that just truly bothered me. And so seeing that there was inefficiency while unmet need is what really made me uh, start Advocat.
So, identifying the need and also it sounds like um, figuring out like what am I passionate about in terms of solving a need. It sounds like you've identified that through your practice. Advocate obviously has like a significant tech side to it, which unless I'm missing it, wasn't entirely in your background. So, how did you kind of decide? And you started this before AI became a thing, before GPT was around. Now, most law firms use AI in some capacity. How did you identify AI as the tool that you wanted to utilize to kind of start solving this need?
Yeah. So I didn't initially identify AI. I identified people, which actually I think was exactly the right way to do it. So within the running of the law firm, I met a lot of very smart engineers through various manners, either wanting to start startups or two of the attorneys within my firm were immigration attorneys, and so also they came through the firm that way. So instead of gathering technologies, because you're right, I had no technology in my background at the time, is I started gathering people who I thought would be really interesting to work with and might have interesting parts of the solution, and just got to know them. And so when it was time to start Advocat, I just had conversations with people who I thought might know the answer to how to solve this problem I was thinking of how to solve, and they did. I started out with a person who is an AI engineer, had done a PhD in AI and had some really exciting ideas. And so a lot of times the people in technology are looking for a problem to solve. And then from the other side, we have problems to solve and don't have the technology. So it's really just the matter of finding the right people and putting it together.
How long how long did that process take from like identifying the problem to identifying the people to figuring out with the right people what the solution might be to then developing the actual platform? Did that take years? Did that take months? How long was the process?
Well, the deciding to do it maybe took the longest amount of time. Is that I spent about a year um, practicing law and leading the firm, but also about an hour, a couple of hours a week, actually, meeting with somebody, meeting with that AI engineer and an AI designer about what they thought the problem was going to be. And then my lawyers started to get scared. They're like, wait, our managing partner is working on something else, which I realized was not fair. Like that was really not fair to them. And so I thought, okay, this is the right time. I actually better find them different places to be, sell the firm, and then move on to work on it full time. And so I wanted to be fair to them while also pursuing this project.
So you took a pretty significant leap of faith, right? I mean, you spent time building a practice. Like you said, there's a steep learning curve, but you got it from 2 to 12, I guess, fairly quickly. Had found the right people for that particular practice, were excelling there, and then you thought of an idea that like other people weren't thinking of, that solved a major problem that I can, as a fellow entrepreneur, I could see why that would be really appealing to pursue, but you weren't sure it was going to work, right? You had a feeling that it might work. So talk me through how you how you navigated that.
So, I mean, it's funny that you ask it that way because I think that for a lawyer, that's the question: is that how did you do it if you didn't know how it was going to turn out? I think for an entrepreneur is that you never know it's going to work. Like there's no way to know that what you're about to do is going to work. All you can know is that you're following a process that you believe in, and you're getting the right people together, and you're taking a leap of faith. But one of the things I did know by that point is that I knew how to build something because I had just built a law firm and felt pretty confident in the ability to do that. Because I think in anything that you do is the key to success is having the right people, and that was what was so good about the firm is having the right people, and they were great. They are really great attorneys, and also great staff. And so I knew how to build, and so I knew that I could do it again. And if what I'm trying doesn't work, I would just build a law firm again. And hopefully, I had built enough loyalty and goodwill among the attorneys that were in my firm in the first place that they'd be willing to join me again. But also, I actually really felt that a responsibility as well when one of them took me aside and said that she was really scared that I was working on something else. Is that I didn't think I could do it any other way. Like I didn't think that I could put somebody else's career on the line when I'm deciding to take a leap of faith. Is that I didn't have a right to take that leap of faith for somebody else unless they've decided to take it with me. And so that's why I decided to move on from the law firm and clean break and start something brand new.
So we've been dancing around this a little bit, but give us the 2 minute overview of what Advocate is and um, how it um, how it solves some of the problems that you identified while you were running your practice.
Yeah. So it works as an internal AI legal team, not for law firms, but for in-house. And so think about a lot of the staff jobs, but not the attorney jobs. So think paralegal, researcher, precedent finder, first drafter, reviewer, like putting all those together. So a lot of the repetitive work that I didn't love to do as an attorney, and a lot of attorneys don't love to do, Advocat does for you. And so what that means is that a lot of the first cut of what an attorney needs to do, Advocate creates that, writes first. It pulls together the research based on precedent, writes a first draft, cites cites research on a panel right next to it, so an attorney is just ready to review. And so it saves a lot of time for an in-house team to just ask for what it needs and then get it within seconds.
Are there um, are there limits in the kinds of documents that it can create? What's like the core market for?
Yeah, so it's for in-house teams to do their day-to-day business. So it's essentially corporate. So it's not litigation whatsoever, and it's essentially contracts.
Let's leave the building to the side because I would ask very inarticulate questions about that. Once you had the product in a place where you were comfortable with it, how did you go about interfacing with businesses as its utility? Again, this is I would imagine this is all pre GPT, right? Or is this starting to overlap with GPT when you're selling?
No, we were building before GPT. We were actually building using some technologies that predated GPT. GPT was actually around in its earlier forms before, rather GPT 1 and 2 were around when we were first starting to build. We tested them. They weren't anywhere near as good as what we needed to solve the problem. It was really by GPT-5. I mean GPT 3.5. There's no GPT-5 yet, but hopefully in the next couple of months we'll get it. But GPT 3.5 that we it was finally actually ready for what we saw, the results that we saw in other things.
So how did you go out into the market and pitch the idea? How did you get people interested in it?
Yeah, so it's actually the opposite of what you would do in a law firm is that you don't build a product and then pitch the product. You do it the other way around. You start out with going out into the market and just getting to know the problems that people face, and say, all right, this is what I think is going on. Is that how you see it? Here's the screenshot that I drew on a piece of paper. Would you use that? what button would you click if you did that? Like, so you really, like, you just get to know, I mean, actually, even the what button would you click is after a few interviews. And so you get to know the problem as deeply as you can before you build a single thing. Because so from my perspective, building is expensive. You pay engineers to build something, and if you ask them to build the wrong thing, you've just wasted a lot of money. And you can do so much better. So instead of that, I spent a lot of time talking with in-house legal departments and getting to know what it is they wish existed. And I would even ask them, like, if you had a magic wand and you had the exact perfect thing, what would that thing be?
Yeah.
And so I spent a lot of time there before building, and then we took that, created software requirements, gave that to engineers. They built it, and we took it back to the same people. And they of course had tweaks. They didn't love what we had built based on what they said at first, and then iterated until they did love it.
At the risk of oversimplifying your process, it sounds like you drew on your experience at the State Department when you were doing those mock tours, kind of identifying needs in different locations and crafting solutions. But are there parallels there, or am I grossly misstating
Yeah,
what
that's
took?
really that is really smart. That's a parallel that I don't think I had seen before. Yes, there is. Except for this, I think what really runs through it is the intention to solve problems. Because I think, right, I think that's something that we as attorneys do, right? We're in there that to try to fix things and make things better than the way that we found them. And entrepreneurs do the same thing, right? Is that if you're just there to build something because you want to sell something, you're probably not going to be very successful. If you're there because you see something, a problem that needs to be solved, and you want to solve it, that it just works much better.
I think the biggest difference is attorneys are not always, but usually reactive, and you were going out and proactively fashioning a solution for problems that in-house teams were being reactive to, but now could be proactive for.
That's definitely true, and I think it's a pretty exciting question to ask somebody of if you could wave a magic wand and what you wanted existed, what would that be? Like the look that people get on their faces is priceless.
Right.
And they usually have a pretty specific answer. They get excited, like they'll get into it, and some people will whiteboard. Like, oh, this is what I really want. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. What's what has been like the greatest challenge that the company's faced as it's been growing? What where have you hit roadblocks and had to pivot or change course a little bit?
well, so a few different things. One is being an attorney, building a tech company has its own challenges. And that has to do with the fact that, so a tech company might be fine with moving fast and breaking things. As an attorney, I'm not, right? Is that it's, I don't want to break anything. I'd like to fix things, but I don't want to break anything. I actually think that that would be breaching a legal duty to just to break something and telling somebody eventually it'll be better because I say it's going to be better. I didn't want to do that, and so some of it was that is to build something that I knew would not only solve a problem, but would do it in a way that didn't create harm to somebody. And in the early days of AI, and even still, it's something that really informs us is that doctors have the Hippocratic oath. First of all, do no harm, but really, the attorneys have that too. We don't call it that, but at minimum, we can't harm the people that we're trying to help. And for Leah, for AI, that informs the way that we design a product and what weight we put on various parts of building the AI. What information we allow to go into a system and not go into a system, and so how we maximize how effective something works is weighed against the risk of harm.
So, with that in mind, put on your prognostication hat. What does the future of the intersection between AI and the legal practice look like? Do you think 10 years from now, every single law firm will be leveraging AI? Do you think some people are going to get lost in the dust? Do you think um, What do the next 5, 10 years look like?
Yeah. To put it this way, so before I went to law school, people were using books. I mean, actually, all right, I admit it. Also, while I was in law school, and a little bit after, there were definitely people in law firms that would find precedent by pulling a book off a bookshelf and finding it and reading it and comparing. And then right around that time, uh, legal search became the prevailing way of finding anything. And then also, very quickly, it became malpractice not to do that. If you weren't trying to find cases, statutes, and related materials using search, then you were probably missing a lot. And you were probably just using the books either because you didn't know how to use the search because you hadn't taken the time to inform yourself and learn how to do it, or it was some cultural, you decided that you didn't want to expose yourself to this new way of thinking. And either way, it was malpractice. And so I think that that is what not using AI is going to become. And I realize that among lawyers, it's a pretty hot and controversial topic because there are a whole lot of ways to commit malpractice using AI. And so it's important to be careful in both directions. But deciding to just entirely not become informed on how to use AI will very quickly be malpractice.
Yeah, I really like how you positioned coming up with the company and the springboard being people and problems. That's always going to be the case, right? This is, I think, um, there's concerns about professional services going the way of the dodo uh, as AI becomes more prevalent. But it's just another very significant tool in the toolbox to leverage great people and to fix big problems. I think that's the best way of looking at it. And it sounds like that's how you view it as well.
That's absolutely how I view it. And I think that the judgment that attorneys bring, as well as the empathy of really wanting to solve the problem, that's not something that's replaced by AI. It's enhanced by AI. We get to do that better because the repetitive parts are done by AI.
So if law firms, lawyers out there want to find out more about, I think I was saying it wrong, Avocat. I was saying advocate before. So I apologize for that. If they want to find out more information about the platform, about yourself, where should they go?
Yeah. So Advocat is www.advocat.ai. So you can find us on the internet, of course. And if anyone wants to talk to me, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I love having conversations.
Wait, before I let you go, I do have one question. What are your views on lawyers using OpenAI uh, in their day to day practice? How do you think? Obviously, in house teams should use Avocat, but for for law firms who are let's litigation firms that want to make best use of open source AI, where do you think the logical starting point is? I don't
Yeah,
want you to rely on what you're saying as legal advice, but well,
sure.
from your professional experience, what's your thought on that?
Yes. So there are two really important things that lawyers have to consider. The first is privacy, the second is accuracy. And paramount. Both of those are paramount. So just using ChatGPT and putting confidential client information into it, into a system that could learn on your client data is absolutely not something that any lawyer should do. That clearly breaches the duty of confidentiality. You don't do that. And so there are a few different ways to protect against that. The main is that using a version that doesn't learn on the data that you put in, and that API access has that, and that's what all legal tech companies use is an API access to the various LLMs. And then if your firm could build with API access, that is one way to do it. And I've heard that ChatGPT has a button that says "Don't learn on me." I have not used that myself. I don't know that a toggle button would scare me. The toggle button's all I have that is protecting me from breaching duty of confidentiality. I know some people do it. I wouldn't myself. And so to me, the API access is the best way to go. And there really are a lot of great tools that are built that solve that problem, that have API access. So if the firm doesn't want to build its own access, it could use one of these tools. They're great tools directly for litigation. There are great tools that are built for law firms. There are, of course, great tools built for in-house legal counsel as well. And so I think right now, the way to do it is to go through a company that is purpose-built to solve these problems regarding privacy. So that was the first part. But accuracy is something that every lawyer still really has to decide for themselves. Don't submit a brief to the court when you haven't checked, when you haven't read the cases that it cites. My goodness, yes. So watch out for both of those.
Yeah. Well, this was great. I could have extended this conversation for another hour, but want to be respectful of your time. Definitely want to have you back on as we see how um, the law evolves with AI becoming more and more prominent and more used. And we appreciate your time.
Glad to be here. It was nice talking with you.
Thank you.
For more on all things real estate and the law, subscribe to this and our other podcasts. Follow Bergstein, Flynn, Knowlton, and Polina on social media. Subscribe to our newsletter and go to bfklawoffice.com. That's bfklawoffice.com to learn more.